So you really think he might call an election on Monday? You're really saying that?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't. It's just a hunch. I might be wrong, but it's just I can't understand why he would do this HS2 thing, and I also can't understand why everyone's so quiet and not saying what I'm saying. As in, he can't make that decision. He's like, I've decided to make this decision. No, he can't make that decision. He's not allowed to. Parliament's already legislated. It's had royal assent. Everything's been done with it. He can't just stand up in his party conference. Well, he can because he did, but it's not real. It's not a real decision. It's just a soundbite.
Last week, the Prime Minister told me nobody wants an election right now. Is he right?
No, he's completely wrong about that. What he really meant was he's not happy to go to the electorate because he thinks he will lose. I think he said last week something that I agree with, which is that the last few years have been the wrong decisions and we need change. I say spot on. Let the country decide the change that it needs. That can be done through a general election.
Liz, you just sent me a video of Beth Rigby and Keir Starmer. What's it all about?
Fighting talk from Keir Starmer. I think, like me, he thinks there could be a chance of a snap election.
And what makes you think that?
Well, I've been thinking for some time that Sunak faces, every month he's in power. I think that his situation gets worse. He's going to lose more and more seats because there's so many problems ahead. But his recent decision, or supposed decision at conference about U-turning on HS2 on the last leg, I think that means that he is going to an election because he doesn't have the power to overturn that decision without a real battle in the Commons. And he's not assured of winning. Plus, he won't really save any money because if they pull out of all of the contracts, there's not really going to be any money left because all of those contracts have been awarded and they will have to pay penalties in the clauses. So
what can Sunak achieve to either sabotage Starmer and help himself desperately in these last few months? How's this going to help him? Will there be rebellion against him from some Tories? Will Labour abstain? How might this play out?
Well, I don't know how he's going to do it. I mean, I don't know if you remember Theresa May all the way through kept saying, no, I won't have an election. And then suddenly she called an election. So you just can't take their words at face value. All I know is that on the 24th of October, I think it is, the letters can go in and his year's grace is up. As we saw in the conference.
Good point. Hadn't thought of that.
And
there's a by-election just before, right? There's the mid-beds on the 19th.
Exactly. And so there's just it's like a minefield ahead of him. So I just wouldn't be surprised if he suddenly announces a snap election and they decide to hand over the winter of many problems to Labour. I think that they must have realised that if they hang on until next year, they're only going to be full of more problems. But in saying that he's going to be saving money by reversing HS2 decision for the final leg, it may be a trick to say, oh, I've got this extra money for, some sweeties like tax cuts. Perhaps it's that. It's maybe a campaign trick. I don't know. It's just a guess. I might be wrong. I have been wrong sometimes.
One of the things that you pointed out was that he's at conference said, I'm doing a U-turn on HS2, but then he still has to get it through Parliament. So can you tell me a bit more about what your thoughts about that?
He can't. The HS2 decision was made. It was put to Parliament. It's all been put through the various departments and costed, and the Treasury have literally gone out and negotiated contracts. He can't undo it without making an absolute, it's a huge thing.
But with his majority,
no power to undo it.
But with this majority, this is the other thing. I can't imagine how embarrassing it would be for MPs who have voted for the full HS2 to then be whipped by him and say, oh, we're now voting against full HS2. that would remind me of the Owen Paterson thing, where everyone was whipped to back him, and then a couple of days later they had to say, "Oh, we're against it."
It would have been a heck of a lot easier for Boris Johnson to come in and undo the Brexit decision after he'd won in 2019 than to undo the HS2 decision.
I can't believe you've turned this into a Brexit question.
Well, of course, because
you really are a fanatic.
At that stage, he only would have had to, to get new legislation over the Withdrawal Act. To undo the HS2 decision is massive, and there's no gain for it, apart from if you want to have a little campaign trick to suddenly have some magic money.
So, what should people have their eyes on then in the next few weeks?
Well, let's just see. He might come out of that little door and suddenly on Monday and suddenly say, it's been a lovely conference season and I'm calling an election. I mean, I just wouldn't be surprised if that
but there's
happens.
a by-election happening on the 19th, and that would still go ahead, I assume. So
I don't know if it would go ahead. It probably wouldn't, would it?
Liz, if let's say there's no by-election called on Monday, I mean general election called on Monday, what else, like on normal play, what else might be coming up?
Well, if he doesn't call an election on Monday, then we have the by-election next week, and he faces significant hurdles because Parliament is not going to be happy about this HS2 overreach of power, and there's going to be a lot of arguments, and there's probably going to be legal challenges, which is why I think
I'm starting to understand a bit more what you're saying. The general election is the only way of solving it, because then that way, should he somehow win the election, he can say, I can do what I want. And if he loses it, he can say, thank God. Right? Is that what you're saying?
He's not going to win the election.
Yeah,
there's no way he's going to win the election unless Starmer completely messes up somewhere. But there's no way Sunak is going to win the election. He might just hang on to some voters by promising some tax cuts.
So you really think he might call an election on Monday? You're really saying that?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's just a hunch. I might be wrong, but it's just, I can't understand why he would do this HS2 thing. And I also can't understand why everyone's so quiet and not saying what I'm saying, as in, he can't make that decision. He's like, I've decided to make this decision. No, he can't make that decision. He's not allowed to. Parliament's already legislated. It's had royal assent. Everything's been done with it. He can't just stand up in his party conference. Well, he can because he did, but it's not real. It's not a real decision. It's just a soundbite.